Hello. The working title for this video was supposed to be how to work with Workdays without doing too much work, but then I decided that I was working way too hard to be cute, and as a result I'm just gonna title this Working with Workdays. As you probably know, Power BI comes with a pretty substantial set of time intelligence functions that allow us to do a lot of calculations and logic based on time and calendar. However, sometimes we're faced with situations where we care about some days more than others. So for example, if we're looking at shipments coming out of our manufacturing facilities, our plants, and plants only work on certain days in the week, then a lot of logic in manufacturing and also in finance and operations is based on how many work days the plant is open, and if a task requires a number of work days, and we need to factor in holidays and weekends, then working with that kind of math can become challenging. In this video, we'll go over how to make those types of calculations and those types of challenges a little bit easier to work with. So let's take a look at a couple of examples here as to what types of problems we're trying to solve. So our first table here above, we're looking at revenue analysis for 2 months in 2017, January and February. And according to our calendar, January has 31 days in that month, in that year, and February has 28 days that year. And once we factor in all of the weekends and holidays, and I will go over how those things are factored in, we see that there's 20 working days in January and 17 days in February. Why is this important? Well, let's take a look at a couple of examples. First, we see that our revenue in January was $715 million, and our revenue in February was $585 million. So if we just look on the revenue change month over month, we see that in February our drop in revenue was minus 18.13%. So roughly almost 20% drop in February. The question is, how bad is it? Well, if we don't look into number of working days, so let's say we can only ship out of our orders on certain days. So if we have fewer days in a month, we're only going to be able to ship a certain amount. Let's say I can only ship 1,000 orders per day. So if I have fewer shippable days in a month, then I'll be able to ship fewer products in that month. So the next thing what we've done is we say, okay, well, what was the revenue per work day? So if I divide this revenue by number of work days, we see that in January, on average, we were shipping $36 million a day on a work day, and in February we're sending $34 million per day. So now you see that this is a much different situation. So it's not like there's some major issues that we need to address. Our real drop was about 4%, right? So a lot of this revenue variance could be explained not necessarily by bad performance of our general manager or challenging market conditions. It's, we can also say, listen, we only had 17 work days in the whole month, so we were fully utilized shipping product, but all we could do is 34 million, and we see, the real impact was only 4%. So we will go over the calculations necessary to implement this sort of analysis later in the video. And the other thing we're going to be able to do at the end of the video is do number of work days left. So often if you do daily sales, you're saying, let's say you're in the middle of a month, there is, let's say, 17 days in the month, you're on day 11, and you're trying to figure out what will your sales be by the end of the month. In order to do that, you need to know how many work days are left. So here I created a table, and you can see the calculation of how we calculate work days. And you see, for example, January 30th, which is one before last day. We only have 1 day left. So we will talk about how these calculations are done in the rest of the video. In this video, I will not be building the calcs from the start, just to save some time. So we're just going to go through all of the logic that I've done to this to this file so that you can understand the thought process behind it. So the first question that we need to figure out is we have a calendar. So we have I assume that you already know how to create a date dimension, date table in Power BI. So that table was created by just using the calendar function in this case. And then we added all of the attributes: year, month, period, which is the month number, week, period name, month ID, and so forth, fiscal year. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create another attribute, call it IsHoliday. And what we're going to do is we're going to figure out whether this day is holiday or not. And you can see that what we're doing here is we're looking into a table called holidays, and we're saying, so we're looking it up, and then we're saying if there is a matching holiday on this date, then we're going to say we're going to say true, and if there is no holiday on this date, we're going to say false. How do I know whether there is a holiday? Well, I have a holiday table, so let's find it in our report. So here it is, our holiday table. In our case, I only have holidays for 2017. These are all the holidays, and you can create it in Excel. In my case, I just use enter data functionality, and I just found online some of the holidays and pasted it right in. And what I did was I also created a relationship between the holiday table and our date table, and they're related by date. So now that I have a table full of the holidays that is maintained in Excel, online, in the app, what have you, and this could also be done by country. So if you want to do holiday for France versus holiday in Canada or US, so all of that could be maintained. And then I'm linking it back to my date here so that I can do my lookup. So the lookup is done here. So again, I just created a column, say is holiday, and then for every row in a date table, I go into holidays lookup table and see if there's a matching record there. And if there is a match, then it's a holiday. If there is no match, it's not. So let's see if this works. I'm going to filter it to true. And now you see 23 different holidays that I came up with for 2017. So let's uncheck this. And let's go through the rest of them. So the other thing we need to do, take into account for Workdays is, so we're going to take out all of the state holidays, but we also need to take out weekends. So there's several ways for us to do this. What I've done is I've created a column called weekdays, and then here you have Monday, Friday. And the way I do this is I just use a format function, and I format the date column, and I specify DDD as the parameter, and that just spells out the weekday. And then here I create a column called weekday number, and I'm using Power BI weekday function that also is looking at my date column. And I like to use 2, so I start my week from Monday. You could also use 1 if you want to start from Sunday, and there's a couple other options there. So now we can do our IsWorkDay column. So the way this logic works is we say if the day is holiday, if it's true, so if this column here is true, or weekday number is greater than 5, so it's Saturday or Sunday, then it's going to return true. Again, I like to do the day starts from Monday. If you start from Sunday, then you want to say, if the workday is 1 or 7, then it's not a workday, right? So now at this point, I have this most important column, because this column for every row in my date dimension, date table, is telling me which record is a workday and which is not a workday. The next thing is a really useful column. And what this column will allow me to do, it will allow me to navigate up and down, back and forth in time. If I have a date, then I can easily go back X number of days in the past or in the future to find out the date given the period specified. So for example, if I'm on this 1/19/2015, which has an index of 7, if I want to do 2 work days back, I just deduct 2 and I end up in 1/7/2015. If I want to go 3 days forward, 7 plus 3 is 10. So again, it's very easy for me to find the date given the to skip number of work days. So this is a very useful column that allows us to do all kinds of crazy things with very simple calculation. By the way, the reason I do things this way is because I assume that if you're watching this video, you're not a DAX guru. You know some DAX, but you're not necessarily super advanced in DAX. A lot of what I'm doing here in several steps could be done in one step and in one calculation, but that calculation will be then very difficult to understand. So I believe that when you're starting up and you're not particularly advanced yet, what you should do is you should create a bunch of those intermediate steps and persist those calculations in columns, and that makes the rest of the calculation in logic much easier. And it also makes it easier for somebody who is taking over this model from you to understand how your logic works. Because if you have a half a page of a calculation and somebody new is looking at that calculation, they're gonna have a really hard time understanding how it works. So this calculation is kind of mid-level, so let's see and try to understand how this works. So basically what we want to do, we want to provide a unique value, unique ID for every workday. And if a date is not a workday, we're going to provide no value there. So starting from the very first day will be 1, and then we're just going to increment it for every single day until the end of the date table. So how does this logic work? So the first thing what we want to do is you understand that this is going to be executed for every row in this table. And since we are going to be calculating something that requires us to step out of the current row and take a look at the entire table, we're going to be using the calculate function. And so let's take a look at how it works. So calculate function is going to allow us again to step out of our row context and take a look at the entire table. So for every row, we're going to calculate count of date. So this is going to tell us how many dates there are before the current workday. So if this is the first record, there's, this is going to say 1 because we're doing less than or equal to the current date. So this is going to be 1. This is going to be 2. It's going to we need to skip this 2, and then 3, 4, 5. So how does this work? So we're going to count all of the records. So this is what this code here does. And then where are we counting? We're going to say filter all date. So that means so if I'm in this row, let's say that has an ID 12 right now, or 1/16/2015. So what I want to do is I'm going to step out and look at the whole table. And I want to look at rows where IsWorkDay is true. So it's going to skip all of the rows where all day are false, workday is false. And we're going to look at all of the days where date is less than earlier of current row. And what earlier function does, if you're not familiar with it, it basically says current value of date. So when I say filter, the minute I say filter, I'm not only seeing this row, I'm seeing the entire table. And if I want to do a filter logic or where logic on the entire table, I need to know what my current value is. And when you say earlier date, you're saying my current row date. So what this does, it says, okay, find all of the records in the table that are work days and where the date is before or equal to current row, and calculate how many of those records are. This is what the count does. So what this says here, it says that for this row with record number 3, what it says is that there are 3 rows where date is less than or equal to current date. And we can easily see, yeah, it's 11, 1, 1, 2, and then this 1, 5. So it skips 1, 3, and 1, 4 because those are not work days. Hope it makes sense. So again, if you're not familiar with earlier function, I assume that you're familiarized with it. It's a really useful function when you're trying to add columns to the record, and that's the columns to the table. And when you're using a filter on the current table, having the earlier function basically helps you understand what my current row is as I go row by row in my calculation. Okay, now that I have those two fields, IsWorkDay and a WorkDayID, working with Workdays becomes very easy. So, for example, one of the things you might want to do is create a function, calculation called number of workdays. And the way that works is we're just using calculate because we want to see more than one record at a time. And we're going to calculate count date, where date is workday is equal to true. So I could have spelled out date is workday is equal to true, but because it's a false true column in the table, I could just say date is workday. So this basically just counts how many date records I have in my date dimension that are workdays. So now that we see how this works, you could see that for January we have 31 days in the month, but only 20 work days. In February, 28 days in the month, but only 17 work days. From there, now we're gonna calculate the revenue by workday. That's very easy. We're just gonna divide our revenue by a number of work days. Okay, so that's a very simple calculation. Again, if you're new to Power BI, always use divide because that will make sure that if you're not running into trouble dividing by 0. And the other function we need to create is we need to calculate revenue for revenue change, revenue by workday month over month change. So here's the calculation. We're using a variable. We're calculating the prior month revenue by workday, and then we're dividing current minus prior divided by prior. That's going to give us revenue by workday month over month change. So with those calculations now, you could see how just having that is working days, making it easy to create this sort of analysis. The next question is how we're going to do the number of workdays left. Here's the calculation for workdays left in the month. And this is what we put in this column here below. So the calculation is the following. We use calculate because we're going to be specifying a filter. Every time we're messing with filters in our calculations, we're going to be using the calculate command. We already have the calculation to count number of work days. So the only thing we need to do is, let's say we're on this 127. So what we want to do is we only want to count work days that are after the current day. And that's exactly what this calculation does. So we're saying calculate the number of work days. And then what we're going to do is we're going to apply a filter command or filter function. And we're saying, because we're going to do it in a month, so we don't want to calculate all of the dates. So let's take a look at this real quick. So when we're in 127, we don't want to count days in February. We only want to count days that are in this month, in the month of January. So that's what we do. We have a month ID, and month ID is a column that uniquely identifies each month in a table. So if I am in January 2017, month ID would be 2017-01. If I'm in March 2018, month ID will be 2018-03. So this tells me that I need to be in the current month. So every time I want to know what current month is, we use a selected value, current month ID, right? Month ID. So what this does, it says, okay, calculate number of work days I have in the month that has been selected, but the date workday ID has to be bigger than the workday ID for the current day, right? So we only want to do it for the month we're in, and that's what this part of filter will do. Then we use two ampersands because that says and, so both of these values, conditions have to be true. So as long as I'm in the same month and this workday ID is bigger than my current one, which means it occurs in the future, count it. And now we could see how this works here. So we said that there is, let's do it again, uncheck this. So there's 20 days in January, so let's see if this works. So on the first working day, there's going to be 19 left. So that checks out. If I go to February, I only have 17 days in February. So on the start of the workday in February, I will only have 16 days left. So now we can use this workdays left in month to calculate, if I'm doing my daily sales, for example, calculate how much revenue I can expect next. So how would I do that? Let's say I'm on day 7 in February, so I have 17 days left. I can calculate how much revenue I get by day. So in this case, it's 34 million. So if I have 10 days left and I sell 34 million per day, then I could say 34 times 10. So I'm expected to receive another 340 million. As you can see, working with Workdays doesn't have to be a lot of work. Hope you found this video informative, and please come again for more videos in the future. Thanks. Bye.